All right, get ready because we're diving deep into some research that's got me thinking. Is AI getting closer to how our brains work?
Yeah, and not like, the Terminator or anything like that.
Right, right. No robot uprisings just yet. But this research is pointing to some pretty big changes in how we understand both AI and, well, ourselves.
Absolutely. This study that just came out in Nature Machine Intelligence is really groundbreaking. It compares how these large language models, those are LLMs like, ChatGPT work, compared to, get this, real human brain activity.
And they use data from actual people having brain surgery.
I know, right?
That's wild.
That's wild. They were working with patients who had epilepsy, and to monitor their seizures, these patients had these electrodes implanted.
Okay, so they were able to record brain activity while the patients were doing what, just like living their lives.
Well, in this case, they had the patients listen to stories, and they recorded their brain activity while they were listening.
Okay, so that's fascinating, but how do you even start to compare, like, brain data and AI? Those seem like totally different things.
You're right, they are. But the key here is looking at how both process language. We're learning that both our brains and AI models seem to break down language in similar ways. Like they start with those simple sounds, then they build up to words, and then they build up to sentences, and finally, they can make sense of the whole thing.
So it's kind of like building a house, you know? You got to start with the bricks.
That's exactly it. And that whole building process is what researchers think might be happening in both AI and, well, in us. What they did was look at how all the different areas of the brain lit up as people listened to these stories. And then they compared that activity to the patterns you see within all the different layers of these AI language models when they process the same stories.
Okay, so they weren't looking at the actual, like, nuts and bolts, but more like the overall, I don't know, shape of the activity.
Yeah, you got it. That's a great way to put it. They actually tested a bunch of different LLMs, like 12 of them. Some of them have pretty sci-fi names like Mistral and Falcon, to see how well these AI models understood the stories. They gave them these tasks like reading comprehension, like in school, and then common sense reasoning, which I think is super cool.
So, like, can the AI follow along with the story and figure out, I don't know, like if someone's being sarcastic?
Exactly. Like, can they get the gist? And here's where it gets really interesting.
Hmm.
What they found was that the AI models that were structured the most similarly to the human brain.
Hold on, so you mean like the way information flowed through the AI was similar to how it flows through the brain?
Yeah. Those were the models that actually did the best job on all the language tasks. Like the AI that thought more like a human brain was better at understanding the stories and answering the questions.
Whoa. Okay, so what does this mean for like the future of AI? Are we talking about AI becoming more human-like in like how it learns and how it thinks?
Well, it's definitely a possibility, right? I mean, this research opens up a whole new way to look at both AI and ourselves. But we're just starting to scratch the surface here.
So no robot poets just yet.
Uh-huh. Not just yet. But what's wild is that this research is also telling us something new about how our brains work. The fact that these AI models do better when they're structured more like our brains, that tells us something important about how we process language.
So we're not just building smarter AI, we're using AI to like unlock the secrets of our own brains.
Exactly. It's a two-way street. We're not
Yeah.
just building smarter machines. We could be uncovering the mysteries of how our own intelligence works.
Wow, that's pretty amazing.
It is amazing.
But I'm guessing there are still a ton of questions that need to be answered.
Oh, yeah, for sure. For example, like, does this connection between AI and our brains only hold true for language? Or could it be true for other stuff too?
Yeah, like memory or problem solving or, like that creative spark, right?
Right.
Like, are we going to see AI that can do all that stuff too, just like us?
Yeah, like, are we going to have AI Picassos running around? Well, that's what researchers are working on now. And it's a journey that could lead to breakthroughs in how we understand ourselves and how we build AI. Who knows what we'll find?
I mean, AI that can, I don't know, like write a symphony or paint a masterpiece.
Uh-huh. Maybe someday.
Yeah.
But in the nearer term, imagine, like, AI assistants that can really get what you're trying to say. Not just, like, the words you're using, but, like, the actual meaning behind them.
Right, like no more arguing with your phone to get it to set an alarm.
Exactly. Or think about, like, chatbots that can have a real back and forth with you. Or AI tutors that can figure out exactly how each student learns best and tailor the lessons just for them.
Oh, wow. Personalized education for everyone. Now, that could be a game changer.
Right. It could. But let's think even bigger. What about something like, healthcare? How could this kind of AI change things there?
Yeah. Good question.
Well, what if AI could, like, look at your whole medical history, how you live your life, even your DNA,
Hmm.
and come up with a health plan that's, like, perfectly designed for you?
Whoa, so like no more one-size-fits-all medicine. That could be huge. We could prevent problems before they even start.
Exactly. That's like predicting the future of your health. But what about, like, mental health? Could AI help there too?
I've never even thought about that.
Imagine AI therapists that are available, 24/7. They could give you support and advice whenever you needed it.
Yeah.
Or AI that could, like, analyze your voice or your facial expressions and tell if you're starting to get depressed or anxious, even before you realize it yourself.
So we're talking about AI that could understand not just our bodies, but our like emotional state too.
Yeah, that's right. And it goes way beyond just healthcare. Think about how we communicate. AI that could really understand all the little things in language, all the cultural stuff, that could help us translate languages better, break down barriers between people. Heck, it could even help with, like, global diplomacy and peacemaking.
AI peacekeepers. That's a wild thought. So it sounds like this research could touch pretty much every part of our lives.
Yeah, I think so. But with all these potential upsides, I got to ask, are there, like, any downsides, anything we need to be cautious about?
That's a good point. There are always two sides to every coin, right?
Right. Like with any powerful tech, there's always the chance it could be misused. What if you had AI that was so good at understanding us that it could be used to, like, manipulate us? Like through, I don't know, super personalized ads or propaganda?
Oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about that. Kind of creepy when you think about it. The more AI becomes like us, the more it could use our own weaknesses against us.
Right. That's why it's super important to have, like, ethical rules and guidelines in place. We got to make sure that AI is developed responsibly and used for good, not for, like, controlling people.
So it's not just up to the scientists and engineers, right? This is something we all have to think about.
It is, absolutely. Policymakers, regular people, everyone needs to be part of the conversation. We all need to decide what we want the future of AI to look like.
Okay, so a lot of responsibility comes with this tech, for sure. But I gotta say, I'm still kind of blown away by what we're learning. It feels like we're on the edge of something massive, you know?
I know it's a little scary, but it's exciting too. All this new knowledge about AI and the human brain, it's like we're about to unlock some huge secrets.
I know, right? Like it's almost like a mystery novel, and we're just getting to the good part.
Uh-huh. That's a great way to put it.
But let's not get too ahead of ourselves. Can we go back to the study for a minute?
Hmm.
We talked about how they compared the brain activity to what was going on in the AI models, but how did they actually do that?
Oh, yeah, good question. So remember how we were talking about that hierarchical structure in language? Like the building blocks idea?
Right, right. Starting with sounds and building up to meaning.
Well, the researchers looked at how all the different parts of the brain lit up, became active while the patients were listening to the stories.
Like they could see which parts of the brain were firing and in what order.
Yeah. And they were especially interested in this part of the brain called the temporal lobe, which is, like, super important for understanding language. Oh, yeah. What they saw was that the activity in the temporal lobe, how it changed as people made sense of the language, it matched up with the patterns in the AI models that did the best on the language tasks.
Okay, so the AI was kind of copying the brain's natural way of understanding language.
Yeah, it was like the AI was learning from the brain's playbook.
Yeah.
And what that tells us is that this specific structure, this way of going from simple sounds to, like, deeper meaning, that seems to be the key to understanding language, whether you're talking about a real brain or one made of, silicon and code.
That's crazy. So the AI models that were structured most like the human brain were the best at understanding language. But how do you even measure that similarity? I mean, you can't just hold a brain and an AI model side by side and be like, yep, those match.
Uh-huh. No, it's definitely not that simple. They use this fancy math technique called representational similarity analysis. It's kind of like, imagine you're comparing two fingerprints. You're not looking at every little ridge, but more like the overall pattern, right?
Oh, okay. So they were looking for similarities in the, I don't know, like the overall shape of the activity, even if the brain and the AI are made of completely different stuff.
That's it. And get this, the AI models that had a more brain-like fingerprint, like in terms of how their activity patterns looked, those are the ones that aced the language tasks.
So it wasn't just about the AI getting the right answer. It was about how it got there. It had to be thinking in a way that was like similar to how a human brain thinks.
Exactly. Which makes you wonder if there are, like, some basic rules of intelligence that apply to both living beings and AI.
Whoa, that is pretty mind-blowing. Okay, so back to like Real world stuff. What does this research mean for how we build AI in the future? Will we be seeing even more human-like AI soon?
I think it's definitely possible. This research could lead to AI systems that are way more intuitive, more adaptable, more able to, really get us and respond to what we need, like in a truly human way.
So we're talking like AI assistants that are actually helpful, chatbots that don't drive you crazy, AI tutors that can give every kid a personalized education.
Yeah, all that and more. But we could go way beyond just those everyday things. Think about AI in healthcare, like developing custom treatments for people, spotting diseases way earlier, maybe even helping with surgery.
Wow, it's like the possibilities are endless. But of course, we have to talk about the potential risks too, right? What are some things we should be worried about as AI becomes more and more like us?
Yeah, that's important. One of the biggest concerns is like, what if this super smart AI is used for bad stuff? Like, think about autonomous weapons or really advanced surveillance tech, or even just like super targeted propaganda that can mess with people's heads.
Yeah, I can see how that would be a problem. It's like the more human like AI becomes, the more potential it has for good and bad.
Right. That's why we have to talk about the ethics of all this, like really seriously. We got to figure out the potential risks and benefits, and figure out how to make sure AI is used for good things, not for harming people or controlling them.
So this isn't just about the science, it's about how it affects society as a whole.
Exactly. The future of AI isn't like set in stone. It's something we're creating right now with the choices we're making.
That's a pretty sobering thought. But honestly, I'm still excited about all the possibilities. It feels like we're at the beginning of something incredible, like AI and humans working together to build a better future.
I feel that too. It's like there's this sense of wonder and possibility that's just, well, it's inspiring.
Totally. And I think the craziest part is we don't even know what's coming next.
Yeah, it's like we're standing at the edge of like uncharted territory.
Mm.
But before we get lost in all the what ifs, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier about that hierarchical structure and how language works.
Yeah, that pyramid idea. Right, exactly. You said it's similar in our brains and in those fancy AI models. Can you break that down for me? What does that structure actually look like?
Okay, so picture it like this. At the very bottom of the pyramid, you have those basic building blocks of language, the sounds, like the individual sounds.
Like ah or buh.
Yeah, exactly. Those are called phonemes. And then those sounds get combined to form words, right? That's the next level up in the pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
And then those words get put together into phrases and sentences, and then, just keeps building up and up to these more and more complex levels of meaning.
So each level of the pyramid adds on to the level below it. And that's how we get from simple sounds to understanding a whole story or a conversation.
That's exactly it. And what's really amazing is that we're seeing this same kind of structure in these advanced AI models. Like they start with a layer that analyzes those basic sounds, and then they have another layer that figures out the words. And
Yep.
then there are even more layers that are like putting the pieces together, figuring out how the words relate to each other, what the grammar is, and finally like what the whole thing means.
So it's like the AI models are learning to read and understand the same way we do, step by step, starting with those sounds and building up to the big picture.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, right? And the thing is, the researchers found that the AI models that were best at understanding language were the ones that had a structure most similar to the human brain.
So it's not just about having a ton of processing power or, access to all the data in the world. It's about how that information is organized and processed. Having the right structure is key.
Absolutely. It's like you could have all the ingredients to bake a cake, but if you don't know the recipe, you're just going to end up with a mess. You need the right structure, the right steps to get to the delicious cake.
Makes sense. So this hierarchical structure is essential for intelligence, whether we're talking about the human brain or AI. But I'm still kind of stuck on how the researchers actually measured that similarity between the brain activity and the AI models. It seems like it'd be really hard to compare something as complex as the brain to, a computer program.
Yeah, you're right, it is. So they use this really cool technique called representational similarity analysis. It's a way to compare patterns. So basically, they looked at how the activity in different parts of the brain change while people were listening to those stories. And then they compared that to how the activity in those different layers of the AI models changed as they were processing the same language.
So they weren't looking at individual neurons firing or anything like that. They were looking at the bigger picture, the overall patterns of activity.
Exactly. Like imagine looking at a city from space at night. You can't see individual people or cars or houses, but you can see the patterns of light, right? And those
Wow.
patterns can tell you a lot about the structure of the city.
Right, right. Like where the busiest areas are and stuff like that.
Yeah. And in this case, the researchers were looking for similarities in those overall patterns of activity, even though, like you said, brains and AI are made of totally different stuff.
So they were looking for similarities in the shape of the activity, not the actual material, right?
Yeah, exactly. And here's the crazy part. The AI models that had a more brain-like structure, like in terms of those patterns, those are the ones that were the best at understanding all the nuances of language.
Okay, that is pretty mind-blowing. It's
Yeah,
like it's not just about getting the right answer, it's about getting there the same way a human brain would.
exactly. It makes you wonder, are there some like universal principles of intelligence that apply to both biological and, artificial systems?
Whoa, that's a huge question. But we've got to wrap up soon. Any final thoughts on what this all means for the future? Where do we go from here?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that this research isn't just about building smarter machines. It's about understanding what it means to be intelligent, to think, to learn, to create.
Yeah, it's like we're using AI to hold a mirror up to ourselves. We're learning about AI, but we're also learning about what makes us human.
I love that, holding a mirror up to ourselves. And who knows, maybe someday we'll even be able to answer that question, what does it mean to be human?
Well, that is definitely something to ponder. To all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AI and the human brain. It's a journey that's just beginning, and who knows what amazing discoveries lie ahead.